G'day guys, Mac with the Circle, and today I want to do something different. I've had a lot of requests to talk about the latest Contemptor Dreadnoughts and what I think of them. What are people saying that they really don't hold up to the older style of Dreadnoughts that were created, or the hand-sculpted ones back in the past, how the new ones feel lazy, they're cheap, things like that. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. I haven't had a really good look at the Ultramarines one yet, or the Blood Angels one, the Incanadaeus or something, Incaius, something like that. I'll figure it out when I actually get to that model. So I'm going to look at all the Contemptors today, all the different Contemptor Dreadnought chassis that have been released in this video, and I'm going to talk about what I like, don't like, and rate them all. There are obviously some that are my clear favourites, and I'll point them out as we go along. I'll also point out the things I think they got really good in the designs and the things that they didn't get quite right with each design. So, without further ado, let's get started. And we're going to start with the original Contemptor. And I'm going to do these in order of release, because I think that's important to show the evolution over time. So, this is the original Contemptor Dreadnought. And let's just say everyone fucking loved this model when it dropped, and I know quite a few people who put them in their armies. Now, for me personally, there is one thing I dislike about it, and one thing only, and that is the purity seals stuck on the chest. If it didn't have those, it would be so easy to put this into any time period for any legion. Unfortunately, with those on there, it's a bit of a letdown. Apart from that though, you can see the basis of the Contemptor Dreadnought, what would become the classic Contemptor that we all know and love. Of course, you've got the lovely 3D view here. Panoramic, if you will. Yeah, lovely model. And it's been the mainstay of many heresy armies. It's not their best Contemptor, for sure. In fact, I think the next one, which we'll go straight on to, the Relic, has been used in many more armies, because the Relic, it's just better. So, obviously the Relic adds a bit of trim around the knees, the crutch plate, has the wreath going on around the torso. This was a go-to for a lot of Ultramarines players, as per this image, as well as the Empress Children players. You'll see a lot of similarities between this and the Empress Children Dreadnought later on. I think it was heavily inspired by this one. I also like the little Gothic arch above the head of the Dreadnought, the helmet, even though there's no head or helmet there realistically. And the sort of cheek plates that are on the head. It's great. Again, the letdown for me, purity seals. I don't like the purity seals. It's just, I feel like it's a cheap way of adding more detail to a model that they go for. Is just, they have a few in the bits kit, or they're pretty easy to sculpt, let's face it. Anyone can sculpt them, so they just sort of slap them on to fill up blank space. And I really don't think they're needed in order to make the Contemptor Dreadnoughts look great, because frankly, they already look great. So that's the Relic Contemptor. So next up we have the Horus Heresy proper, and this, without doubt, is my favourite Legion Contemptor Dreadnought, the World Eaters Dreadnought. So, what does this get right? Well, for a start, no more purity seals. They're not all over this fucking model. Beautiful thing to see as well is the studded shoulder pad, very reminiscent of the Heresy period. Love it. Another great thing that this Dreadnought has going on is the helmet. So the helmet itself actually shares similarities with the power armored helmets, although it's very hard to see in this image of the time. So it's sort of like Mark II power armor helmets being put into the Dreadnought, unlike the other patterns. Of course, you have the Legion icon on the shoulder, on the knee, but otherwise it's mostly blank canvas in order for you to do with as you will. It is a fantastic model, and yeah, to this day, my favourite Contemptor Dreadnought. In the close running for favourite Contemptor Dreadnought is the Death Guard Dreadnought. This one, I really like it for another simple factor, that unlike the World Eaters Dreadnought, which had the really big iconography that, fills up the entire left shoulder, the kneecap, the chest, The Death Guard one, it's an icon on the left greave, a Legion numeral on the chest, and a numeral on the shoulder pad. They're all really easy to remove, which means this Dreadnought, more than any other, is rife with conversion possibilities. Looks great in pretty much any Legion force, and in many 40k forces. And like the Relic Contemptor, has really been a mainstay of the heresy scene. The little bits of trim above the shoulders looks great. The segmented greaves on the back of the legs, fantastic design choice. Has also that Mark II/3 helmet design, and even though it's technically a Legion icon in the center of the torso, that sort of Vox grill, it is not so Death Guard that you can't just leave it as it is. People generally won't notice it. And I love the little studs as well on the torso, and there's also little things like at the hip joints, at the top of the legs, the plates there are also segmented. Just adds a little bit of extra something going on without having to slap purity seals or aquillas or numbers or trim or something like that on there. Fantastic design. Next one up though is one that quietly disappeared without any explanation, was not mentioned, didn't go last chance to buy, nothing, just one day, poof, gone. And that's the Iron Hands Contemptor Dreadnought. Hard to get the Forge World original quality pictures, but I managed to get two of them for you. A front and a rear. But let's start with the front. What do I like about this? I like the head, I like the studs on the torso. I don't mind the Legion icon too much. But for some reason, it's never sat well with me, the trim on the chest. The vertical... the side-to-side horizontal segments of the chest doesn't look right. I think the similarity with the Death Guard Dreadnought, if it had gone for that sort of style of chest, just relatively blank, with just some studs, that kind of thing, maybe a big Iron Hand symbol in the front, would have been perfect. Unfortunately, yeah, something about the chest isn't quite right for me. Can't quite narrow it down, but I think it is something to do with that trim. Now, cool thing about this model is you'll see all the cables hanging from under the torso. They're really cool. And in the rear image you'll see a lot more of them, as well as having a very different style of reactor. So again, to use the Death Guard one as an example, this is the standard Contemptor Dreadnought reactor that all the Contemptors have, except for the Iron Hands one, which has this really interesting design with the smokestacks being sort of more internalized in the Dreadnought, and having a very different looking reactor. This right here, I think would make a fantastic basis for a Contemptor Mortis pattern Dreadnought. It's got all these sort of rough cables hanging off it, that kind of thing. What a great, like, just the rear of this torso with all the cables is just perfect for something like a Contemptor Mortis, which for those who don't know is a lighter weight, more quickly built, not as well built version of the Contemptor that was brought about in the Heresy in order to get Dreadnought numbers on the table. Good way to think of it is the regular Contemptor Dreadnought is like a proper tank. You know, it's like a Tiger tank or a Panther tank. Really well built by skilled engineers. It has its faults, but they've spent a lot of time refining the vehicle, and every nut and bolt is placed in with precision. Whereas the Contemptor Mortis is your T-34 tank. It's rough, it's ready for action, and they just churn them out by the tens of thousands. And they'll have a lot of breakdowns and things like that, but it doesn't matter. It's going to last long enough to do its job for a mission or two. And yeah, this is the perfect basis for Contemptor Mortis. Then we get to the Empress Children. And as you can see, if I go back to the Relic Contemptor, very similar looking Dreadnoughts. Now obviously the Empress Children one has more of a the face or helmet, again, very similar in style to the Phoenix Terminators and to the Empress Children Legion custom helmets. Obviously the Palatine Aquila, that kind of thing going on. It's a very busy Dreadnought though. I think it probably could have done without the additional Palatine Aquila and Lightning Bolt on the lower sides of the torso. I think just the central Aquila and the wreath would have been plenty, but it's good. The leg studs, again, looks great, but probably overused on this model. The non-symmetrical look that, say, the World Eaters one has, where it's sort of the lower left leg and the upper right shoulder have the studs, I think works a bit better than the Empress Children one, just having the studs all around. Of course, opinions may vary on this, and that's totally fine. I do think the Legion icon and the wreaths on the legs looks fantastic, and overall it is a nice Dreadnought. But yeah, just the slightly too much detail on the torso, but in a quite easy to remove area is a good thing. And you're probably a little bit much going on with the legs, but overall still really good, solid addition to the lineup. Then we get to the Salamanders Dreadnought, and this is another one I really do like. Again, you're probably starting to sense a pattern here, but I like simple torsos, and this one has a relatively simple torso. It's just a fire drake icon with flame wreathing around it on the chest. That's it. No additional extra studs. I mean, there's a tiny bit of gold trim, but it's offset to the edges. The chest doesn't feel completely cluttered up with shit. Looks fantastic. Also, this is the first one to actually have some sort of different texture hanging off it, other than like purity seals. So in this case, we have the scales, the dragon scale on the legs. We have some teeth, things like this. This is really going to town, and it's really busy, but it doesn't feel really busy. Yes, it has scales on it. Yes, it has bits of lava and coal and fire sculpted onto it. But at the same time, there's still lots of blank space. The upper halves of the shoulder pads is basically blank space, at least on the left side. The top of the torso, blank. The legs, well, the hip joints are blank. The inside of the thighs and shins is blank. It's really just the outer edges that has the scale and cloak hanging off it. It works. It's one of my favourite Contemptors. Probably my fourth favourite. Next up, we have... I think this is the first real miss for me. The Sons of Horus Contemptor Dreadnought. Now, it's got things I like. So, for example, the chains here, the Legion coin tokens and chains on the shoulders, the skulls hanging off it, the spikes on the hip joint, looks great. Dislikes. I'm not a fan of the Sons of Horus Reaver models, their helmet upgrades, or their torso upgrades in general. They got this weird, like, extra armor plate bolted on feel, but it doesn't look right. The head on this Dreadnought's a great example. It's just this weird sort of cone head frontal plate just attached to it. I don't like that look. Also, the Eye of Horus icon on the knee, not a great look either. I don't know why. I think I prefer just the standard Legion icon. Like on the left shoulder of this Dreadnought, or right as we're viewing it right now, I suppose. That there, the just round eye with the four little points around, that looks much nicer to me than that really stylized one on the right knee. Just don't like it. So for me, this Dreadnought's probably the first miss as far as Contemptors go. But it's got some great parts. If you put a standard kneecap on it, for example, maybe did something different with the torso, like you could use a lot of these parts. The lower legs, for example, would look great on a World Eaters Dreadnought, with the skulls and things like that hanging off them. Same with the shoulder pads. You could probably get away with the shoulder pads for another Legion, possibly. I can't even get a good look at the right shoulder pad, in fact, in all these images. But from memory, it's a really, and you can kind of see the hints of it, there's a really large, ugly eye icon. So, this is not a good Contemptor Dreadnought, in my personal opinion. Alright, moving on. Another great Dreadnought. Probably my 6th or 7th favourite, at a pinch. The Night Lord's Contemptor. Now, great helmet, first of all. They've found a way of being able to pose the head in such a way that you can really see most of it and see that skull. Looks great. The Night Lord's Legion icon on the chest, not too over the top. The chest is busy, but thankfully, all those skulls on the chest, they're actually removable. You glue them on separately when you assemble the model, so they're not too in your face. As for the rest of the Dreadnought, obviously there is flesh on there. The flesh on the knee, for example, the human skin, it's pretty minimal, so it's great. Same with the upper right shoulder pad. The Purity Seals looking thing on the left arm, they used to write like poetry or something and have tarot cards on their Dreadnoughts. There's a reason for it, but I forget. But again, it works because it's not covered in big wax Purity Seals. And of course the lower leg has a few bones hanging off it. But again, simple, still lots of room to let the Legion colours, the Legion heraldry, breathe and come through, that you really don't get with every Legion. So, fantastic design for the Night Lords here. Just basic, but basic is great. Alright, the Word Bearers, or the Turdbearers, if you will. Their Contemptor is, well, it's basically a stock Contemptor with some runes carved into the surface. Yeah, you get the odd tome on the, say, left shoulder. But overall, it's very middling. Nothing leaps out to me as fantastic about it, but nothing is terrible about it either. Everything that should be there is there, and it looks like a Word Bearer's Dreadnought should look like. I don't have much to say on it because there really isn't much going on. I think it has a really good balance of the amount of runes and iconography that have been carved into its surface, and it's not too overloaded with detail. I think the temptation must surely have been there for them to create a version of this Dreadnought which had something like the book that's on the left shoulder, just across its entire chest, just a massive book. I'm certain the temptation was there. Thankfully they avoided it and painted it up. They're a nice looking Dreadnought. Alright, the Iron Warriors one. The Iron Warriors one's another funny one, because I think this could be a Contemptor Quartus Dreadnought, with, again, very minimal work. The studded armour, the haphazard, looks like everything was just being extra armour added and bolted on later, is great. The Iron Warriors style face mask or helmet looks great. So there's some good stuff there. The Legion iconography is not over the top. It's the left knee and one shoulder. The other shoulder is just hazard stripes sculpted in. So, really nice model, with just a slight head swap. Perhaps you could buy the Cyclone Missile Launcher Contemptor Dreadnought upgrade, which comes with a, obviously, Cyclone Launcher, which you can use as a Havoc Launcher in 30k. That comes with a helmet as well, so that will give you a spare head you can replace this out with, which is a standard Contemptor Dreadnought helmet, but with a sort of monocular telescope built into one eye. Do that, shave off the Iron Warriors icons, bada bing bada boom, there's your Contemptor Quartus, and would be my pick for that particular unit. Otherwise, it's okay. Alright, the Imperial Fist Contemptor. Again, another great Contemptor Dreadnought. The Imperial Fist icon is not too huge on the chest. There is plenty of blank canvas there still. There is shield iconography on the knees and such. You can definitely do your own thing with what heraldry you put in it. Yes, one knee has the Raptor Imperialis. The left shin has a Black Templar symbol, or it's the Templar Order. There's a small Legion numeral on the shoulder, easily removed if you want to use this for something like the Crimson Fists or Imperial, Crimson Fists in 40k. Easy to remove that 7th Legion icon, which is great. The wreaths and such, yeah, all in all, really nicely balanced model, and like I say, a lot of blank canvas here. Everywhere there's sort of a shield type shape, like on the right shoulder you're seeing now with the 2 lightning bolts coming off it. They've left it empty so you can put what you want in there, which is a fantastic idea. And also the knees are clearly separate components, like all the Contemptors up to this point, so you can assemble them separately from the miniature and make them sort of curve with the legs to give it a more natural look. The Alpha Legion Contemptor. this is officially my third favourite, Contemptor Dreadnought. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's busy, but for some reason, like the Salamanders one, I don't think it's too busy. Again, there is blank space at the crotch, the insides of the shins, so it's or the calves, I should say. It's again very similar to the Salamanders one. The Salamander one has all the detail on the outer edges. There's some iconography on the shoulders, of course, but the outside edges of the model is where everything's at, and the inside is still kept relatively clean. So you'll see, you're still seeing plenty of that Alpha Legion greenish blue colour coming through, and it really looks great. Downside though, very, very hard to use this Contemptor for any other Legion, but it still looks great. Alright, Hecaton Icos, the Minotaur's Contemptor. So this was a weird one when it dropped. So what do I like about this Dreadnought? I think it has a really nice Power Fist. If the Power Fist just didn't have... if it didn't have the Stormbolter sort of just haphazardly slung underneath it, like that, where it looks like it's been broken and hanging off almost, with that weird shield, the actual shape of the fist itself is really nice. There are too many Minotaur's icons on the hand. The torso, though, and the legs are fantastic, especially the floral work on the greaves looks great. I don't know about the big sort of purity scroll going on in the lower left greave. And the same thing going on with the scrolls on the torso, but the floral work all looks great. The belt area, the terges, the leather strapping, no, it doesn't look right on this model. It's just too symmetrical. It's like a curtain. Someone took a curtain from their living room. Mum's going to be annoyed that you took it down, guys, and they've just hung up on the curtain rod across his crotch. Doesn't look good. I do like the giant shield, though, on the shoulder, but I think the scale is probably too much, or perhaps it should be on the close combat side, or something's off about it. I can't quite place my finger on what. So overall, I'm going to call this one a fail. I think, yeah, it is too much to redeem it going on with the model itself. Of course, again, feel free to disagree with me. If you like it, you like it. I can't stop that. Nor would I want to either. But yeah, it's too busy, and there's, like, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Minotaur icons on the Power Fist. We've got another one on the shins, that's 6, 7, 8, 9 on the crotch, 10 on the chest, 11 on the right shoulder pad. So 11 chapter icons. It's probably too many for a model this size. Yeah. Alright, next one along. Another nice one, but it's the Raven Guard one. I like the Raven Guard Dreadnought a lot, but I do not like the Islander. They've tried to replicate like a tribal tattoo of sorts with the tiny little dots and streaks and swirls going across the torso. The problem is that's something that's best done with a decal, and they have some lovely decals out for the Raven Guard. But instead of using those decals, they've decided to sculpt on the detail, and it looks trashy to me. I've never seen it done really nicely. Probably because it doesn't help that there are a lot of casting imperfections that happen with dots that small, and so a lot of the points of highlight that you would pick out are lost. But if you remove that aspect, or you found a way to shave it off perhaps, this is a really nice Dreadnought. I mean, the helmet looks great, the chest icon with the wings and that skull just sort of inset, oh, that looks fantastic. The rope with the little bird fetishes and totems hanging off it, again, fantastic. So, nice Dreadnought, just ruined by that weird sculpted on tribal pattern. Again, it's something that needed to be just left for decals or freehand or just something other than what they did. It's a real shame because it really lets down, and otherwise, I mean, this would be top tier Contemptor if it didn't have that tribal stuff put on it. Yeah. Alright, the Thousand Suns Contemptor. No secret, I have a couple of these in my Thousand Suns army. Fantastic Contemptor. But because I have a couple of these, and I've had it for so long, I can point out the things I dislike. So, first of all, things I do like are the head crests, the bunny ears, or the Nemes, N-E-M-E-S, the Nemes headdress, the ancient Egyptian style thing, looks fantastic. The helmet of the actual Dreadnought itself, with this sort of grill that widens as it goes down, and the little crest on it, looks great. It's kind of menacing. The chest, mostly blank canvas, except for the scarab and wings icon. Again, fantastic. The knees, one singular part of the shin looks good. I think if the kneecap looks like its own separate part, but is still a part of the shin, that's when I generally dislike it. What do I dislike though? It's got these large slots that look like cartouches, coming from the French word for cartridge, because that's what the French soldiers of Napoleon thought when they saw them when they went to Egypt. A random fact for you guys. Yes, in the Egyptian campaign, the soldiers saw these shapes. Normally, someone like a pharaoh, their name would be inside a cartouche. So it would be this sort of oval shape, or this rounded off rectangular shape, and the row of symbols inside would denote, say, a name. And these are blank. And there are decals available. You can put decal hieroglyphs into these greaves, I suppose. But it probably would have been a great place for them to actually just sculpt some into there. But, you know, beggars can't be choosers. Overall, it's a really, really nice Contemptor Dreadnought. Then, we get this. The Contemptor Rigor Mortis pattern. So, it's partly the Relic Contemptor. It has the trim of a Relic Contemptor on its legs. It has the wreath of a Relic Contemptor on its chest. But then it's a regular Contemptor everywhere else. Okay, that's fine. I don't think as a model those are bad traits. My problem comes from this model being a fucking monopose piece of shit. Because this pose here is the only pose. Unless you start cutting joints apart, this model is going to be stuck in this pose. The arm sockets are there, but they're in the wrong place compared to every single other Contemptor Dreadnought. It's like they went out of their way to make this thing harder to convert. It is so static and monopose, and yet not that long, within a year, not even 6 months or so after releasing this, they released the Redemptor Dreadnoughts, which have tons of posability and ball joints all over them, proving that it could be done in plastic. Why the fuck did they do that with this? This Dreadnought is fucking terrible. I hate it with a passion. It is hard to combine with existing Forge World Dreadnought parts. It's impossible to pose. I mean, you will lose material and have to convert and use green stuff, and the price of it, I mean, $100, a Thousand Suns Contemptor Dreadnought from Forge World in resin is $90. And it's a damn sight nicer looking. And that goes for pretty much all the Dreadnoughts. So, why would you buy this? This is terrible. This is peak lazy design. That sort of... The fact is, right, boil it down. This was released in a box set with Mark IV Power Armoured Space Marines from memory, the Betrayal at Kelth box. The Betrayal at Kelth Space Marines were not snap-fit models. It was not an easy to build, not a get-started kit, something like that. Therefore, the models were relatively complex except for the HQ characters provided, which were monopose characters, but that has been the trend for a long time with characters. This model, all of a sudden, is like an easy-to-build, super simplistic version of something slapped in with models that have hundreds of parts. It's a weird juxtaposition. Why did they go to all that effort of creating these really customizable Legion, Space Marines, and Terminators? I mean, they had Cataphracti, fully posable Cataphracti in this box. and then this Dreadnought. No. Fuck this Dreadnought. Alright, the next one we got is the Sutton Hoo Space Wolves Legion Contemptor Dreadnought. And yes, I know the Sutton Hoo find is possibly more Anglo-Saxon than traditional Viking, but the mask reminds me of the Sutton Hoo mask. For those who don't know, I'm referring to a Viking burial ship that was found in England. So, what do I like about this? Let's start with... the fur is some of the best Space Wolf fur they've sculpted for 30k. That is a really low bar though, because I know 4-year-olds with Play-Doh who can sculpt better fur than what a lot of the Space Wolves in 30k got. The trim on the legs is terrible. It just seems to have no rhyme or reason. I think a traditional Viking or Celtic shape should have a lot more curves to it. Perhaps should go around the edge of the plate and then spiral inwards, something like that. Yeah, this is just gold angles, and in my whole life I can't really think of any Viking wreaths or Viking knotwork that's this kind of shape, like on the greave or the knee. So I don't like those. I do really like the kneecap though on the right side, that sort of stylized wolf serpent thing going on. That's nice. The hanging charms on the left leg is quite nice as well. The Legion icon and shoulder pad is nice. I don't think the wolf pelt needed to be quite so big on the right shoulder. The chest is... I think it's a win. I think the chest's quite good. The head, though, didn't need the monocular telescopic eye. I think it would have been a better model if it had regular eyes. It could still have that gold trim around the eye sockets, and it probably needed to lose the jewel or have the jewel shrunk down in size, because it's quite a massive... It looks like the Contemptor's got 3 eyes almost. And it's weirdly proportioned because you've got 2 things to do with the painting here. Of course, not a criticism of the model, but you've got 2 giant red objects on its head, which are basically the same colour and the same size, and then its real eye is this tiny little thing off to the left. It looks weird. Probably not something you should do sculpt-wise. If anything needs to change on the torso, it's those 2 little badges just above the bottom line of trim. There's one on each side of the torso. One's sort of got a Professor Xavier symbol on it, and the other one's sort of a weird Crux Terminatus looking thing. Probably didn't need those, but again, easy to shave off, so not going to shit on it too much. At the same time that comes out though, we get this beautiful model and this beautiful model, so where to begin? They're basically the same model. We get a different helmet on the Achilles compared to the Galatus. I think the Achilles is the worst looking of the 2, but I mean, it's like comparing supermodels here. Just because, you know, one's a solid 10 out of 10, it doesn't mean the one that's a 9.5 is something you're going to kick out of bed for farting. Let's be honest. So, yeah, the Achilles. Let's walk through it. So these have slightly different thing going on. The greave and kneecap is obviously one part, which is fine. The rest of the Dreadnought assembly is relatively similar to a standard Dreadnought. However, at the elbow and knee joints, there is this additional armor plate that is glued onto the side of the joint. Very similar to something like a Bessigue, which is a piece of armor that overhangs sort of a weak point in traditional knight's armor. I really, really like the curved shoulder pads, which is something you don't see a lot of on the Contemptor Dreadnoughts. That curve is more like traditional power armor or Terminator armor, and it gives you a lot of room to play with without having to paint those sharp, hard edges on each side. It really looks good. The shield icon, yes, you have the large Aquila with the lightning bolts coming off at the top, but the center of the shield is just a decal. It's left blank, which means this shield looks really good on other legions. for example, Dark Angels makes a great looking knightly shield. Also, the feet have pointy or rounded off tips, which is different to the square tips you see on all the other Contemptors. Looks great, in my personal opinion. The sword with the built-in weapon, the flame weapon, not my favourite, but not terrible either. It's pretty well proportioned compared to the Dreadnought. Looks better than the Dreadknights do, and looks better than the Custode Marine Sentinels with their giant swords with built-in bolters do. The shields, yeah, fantastic. The pipework and the rear exhaust vents also looks great. Overall, fantastic models, and realistically, if you have a Legion and you're not a huge fan of what your Contemptor is, like say, again, Ultramarines players, this makes a really, really nice Ultramarines Dreadnought with very minimal work. Because, you know, they're a very ostentatious Legion. Would also look fantastic for the Emperor's Children, for sure. Then we get the Assyrian pattern. So, out of the 2000 Suns Dreadnoughts, this is by far the worst of the two. Why? Well, for a start, it's much more monopose. So that the head or helmet of the Dreadnought is firmly locked into the torso. It's stuck there with the cables going to the head. You can't change the head out for something else. You can't turn the head to look to the side or something, or look at another target. That head's there to stay. Also, the sort of long tassel robes coming down the chest, I don't think it needed them. Also, the Scarab Beetle has weirdly morphed from the Scarab Beetle we had. I really like the chest piece on the original Thousand Suns Contemptor. This one has like this weird H.R. Geiger feel to it. Almost like an egg from the movie Alien. It's got these weird sort of lips on the edges of the beetle, which doesn't look great to me. And of course, its entire crotch piece is one giant codpiece beetle, which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't know about the anal beads, the pearl necklace that is, hanging from the top of its crest with the Necron Resurrection orb in it. It's weird, and I think the shoulders are fine in principle when you compare to, say, the Wordbearers have something very similar going on with runes carving their Dreadnought, but here having the runes also obscured by these large details, Legion wreaths and icons and such, takes away from it, and it makes it way too busy on the shoulders. So really, you need a fine combination of this Contemptor and the original Thousand Suns Contemptor, I think, for a really nice Assyrian Dreadnought. And realistically, if you could take basically the arm, just the force weapon arm of this Dreadnought, maybe the legs, which in this case do have hieroglyphs actually sculpted into the cartouches, which is an improvement. Take perhaps the legs of this and the force weapon arm and put them onto the regular Thousand Suns Contemptor, and maybe this different power unit on the back, which has these sort of vertical slots and trim going on. Take those parts, combine them together, really nice Assyrian. Alright, moving on. The Blood Angels Contemptor. Yeah, I really like this one. Busy, not insanely busy though. It does have its flaws, and the weird flaw is in the middle of each shin, it's got this really random bit of filigree that the gold trim that comes up and then splits off into two directions, like a little fountain, like a little dolphin's tail, whale's tail coming out of the water. It didn't need it there. It's just a weird, again, like the artist was like, there's some blank space, let's put something there. But it didn't need it there. It just needed to be left as a straight line from corner to corner. You put filigree at the corners, not in the center of a panel. Free advice. The chest, similar sort of thing. I think if the trim went all the way around the edges, would look nicer than the trim coming sort of down so that you have to see it from the front. It didn't need it. But apart from that, really, really nice Contemptor. Just a simple Legion numeral on the leg, and the skull and blood droplets on the other. Overall, busy but not crazy busy. It's just the trim lets it down a little bit, but it's definitely not a game breaker. This is a nice Dreadnought. Alright, the White Scars Dreadnought. Now, White Scars having Dreadnoughts is a bit weird in the first place for me. For my own White Scars, I have a Leviathan. I do plan on getting one of these. I'm not sure necessarily how soon. But it probably shouldn't be in white. I think the people who are in Dreadnoughts, I mean, sure, some will say it's the Terran veterans. To me, they should be painted black like the Ebon Kashig. These are disgraced soldiers given one last chance to redeem themselves before true death. Overall, though, really nice Dreadnought. The rope going across the torso, probably a little bit much that it didn't need. I think the red jagged stripes down each side of the torso and the line, the silver line with the gold bead trim looks great. The crutch piece isn't terrible. It's weird that they've repeated the exact same shield design, the exact same proportions, so in two positions, on the shoulder and on the crutch, I dare say. I also recognise that part of my Kizigant speeder, so that's a CAD asset. Someone drew that shield once, and they've just slapped it on this Dreadnought twice and on the speeder as well. This is the problem we're getting into now. Because these are being designed in a computer, they've taken the same existing Dreadnought body. And they're basically adding shit to it digitally. And because of that, we're now getting a bit samey. Notice the knees seem to be apart. They're clearly not glued into the actual ball socket itself. So these knees are actually a part of the lower shins from the looks of things. Which is... I mean, maybe they're not, but it looks that way. Which is not a great thing. There's a lot of ropes on this model. I think what doesn't help is that we know how big these ropes holding fetishes like coins and things should be on, say, an infantry-sized model. But they've been scaled up in accordance with a Contemptor, and so they're way too big. These are like the sort of ropes you would have to tie a ship to a dock. You know, these ropes are the size of your leg in thickness, if not more. They're huge. I think that they need to be brought down in scale a little, but I dare say they've probably drawn a rope up, sculpted a rope, for an infantry model, and they've just sort of hit, 50% bigger or something, or 100% bigger in their computer animating program, and just click and dragged and expanded the size of the rope and then slapped it on the Dreadnought. Not a huge fan of that practice. But otherwise, it's despite the naysaying, it's a nice Dreadnought. I guess I was getting at. Next, the Dark Angels Dreadnought. This is a nice Dreadnought. But. The candles, great touch. The wings on the chest looks great. I think, though, the chest icon itself, the central fallen angel figure, which really shouldn't be a big deal at this point in time, because the watches are not really featured in the Legion's lore yet, or the giant sword that you can also slap in it. I think they're too big. I think if that was 50% smaller, perhaps, and otherwise kept identical, would look much nicer. It's taking your eye away from the face on the Dreadnought, and it's definitely the focal point of the miniature now, is this giant thing hanging off its chest. But the chains look good across the chest, the shoulder looking very much more like a Thunder Warrior shoulder pad or something, with those overlapping plates, looks great. I like the knees, with the shields, they look good. Little checker patterns and stuff. Yeah, no, this is quite a nice model. I really do like those candles, actually. Either side of the torso looks great. Yeah, that's a nice Dreadnought. And the trim, it's not too crazy, especially on the legs. I think that's just the right amount of trim. Yeah, great Dreadnought. Alright, the Contemptor in... I suppose it's like the word Kestis. In Canadus? Incendious. Incendious? I don't know. I don't know how you pronounce that. Okay. Let's see. What is good and bad here? Ooh. Okay. So this is my first time having a really good look at this model since the previews. Where is the other Blood Angels one? Let's compare. Okay. So I like the torso more on this Dreadnought. The front of the torso with the more reined-in trim definitely looks nicer. The helmet is shit on this one. Fantastic on this one. The traditional Contemptor has a much nicer helmet. I think the shoulders on the normal Contemptor are much better as well. This has the plastic Contemptor Dreadnought's shoulders, basically. The knees and crutch definitely worse. So I guess this one has a better chest. But I do not like the look of the weapons. Yeah, the claws aren't appealing to me. I think they need to do something different with the design, because it's basically a regular Contemptor fingertips. They've added some sort of stubby additions. I don't know, maybe a more similar proportion to that Hecaton Icos, or whatever his name was, of the Minotaurs, his fists. But what the fuck is with the back? Okay, so if I was going to have a drop potting Dreadnought like this, I would have the drop engine part be very different to this shape. Perhaps make it resemble a larger version of, say, the Mark II or Mark IV jump packs. I think also extending or cutting the rear of the greaves, the calves of this model's legs out, and putting some smaller thrusters in there, so it actually had some sort of control on the way down, like Iron Man, so feet firing as well as back, to balance itself out would look great. But right now, this engine and all possible maneuvering would be done from the back. This is a problem because, as anyone who knows anything about rocketry, and I'm sorry to bring realism into this, but sometimes you got to, because the immersion gets broken. If this thing was dropped and in any way, shape or form, those engines are not pointing, basically not pointing directly at the ground, and they ignite, this Dreadnought's going off diagonally somewhere. Or, because they're on the back and it's so front heavy, this thing's just going to flip over and start tumbling and somersaulting through the sky. Because the center of gravity on this Dreadnought is most likely somewhere around the middle of its torso. Probably about where the line on the torso that separates the upper and lower half of the torso is, where its fat belly starts to thin out again and heading towards the shoulders. That line is probably the center of gravity line. And that rocket pack is well above that, and it is offset to it. So this is a disaster of rocketry waiting to happen. This would be like Top Gear's Reliant Robin rocket being launched. It's going to go up, and then it's going to come screaming down really fast, head first, with no control, because there is no other... like with the Space Marine, for example, the person in it is able to use their body weight, that kind of thing, with their jump pack, in order to help turn themselves, like a parachute, that sort of thing. A Dreadnought's not going to have that control that a Marine or something would. Especially not with so much sheer power on its back. And I mean, well, I can't speak to the fuel in the future, but if this is a real rocket, the fuel needs to be insanely bigger than the outlet of the engines themselves. There is nowhere near enough fuel to power something like that. No way. Yeah, I do not like that design. And again, I've suggested why I think it could be better. Alright, last one. The Legion Contemptor Dreadnought of the Ultramarines. Let's have a look here. What have we got? Right. Shoulders, good. Shoulders, great. Hip joints, great. Knees, if you want to go with the Roman vibe, I don't think those shapes are great. They should be either ovals, like a Roman auxiliary shield, perhaps square, like a Roman legionaries scutum shield. Not that sort of weird kite, but not kite shield shape that it's got going on. Not great. That central ultramarine icon has got to be a separate component, surely, because it's not even central on the crotch. And that looks terrible. Like a slap-on feature. The skull and lightning bolts above it's okay, and I think I don't mind the Aquila on the chest. It's very big. Where's the Empress Children one comparison? So the Ultramarines have a bigger eagle on their chest than the Empress Children. Don't know that that's setting a good precedent. It's even much bigger than the Blood Angels eagle. Bigger than the Thousand Suns beetle. The beagle. Yeah. Okay, so the eagle is probably about 30% too big, if I had to just pick an arbitrary number. I like the model. I think definitely the crotch piece is letting it down significantly. The knees are not fantastic, and the pose really doesn't help, because it's got that sort of... They're pretty much posed up like the rigor mortis Dreadnought here. Like this Ultramarine Dreadnought. Yeah. Let's see, what's it like from... the back's all normal. That straight leg just looks terrible. Don't ever give your Dreadnoughts straight legs, guys, unless that they're pushing off that leg and the other one's really, really bent to suggest movement. It is not a good look. A posing 101 lesson for you. Yeah, the pose is hurting it more than the actual design itself. Yeah, okay, so that crotch piece is an independent piece. You can clearly see right there it is a separate part. Don't put it on. Don't put it on. And your Dreadnought will already be 10 times better. Maybe you can find somewhere else to use that part. I probably wouldn't. Yeah, don't put that part on. And I think it's a pretty good Dreadnought. I don't know what people are complaining about. I don't see any reason to really hate on this. This is fine. Eagle is a bit big, but I mean, this is not as bad as that Blood Angels Rocket Dread. This looks better than the Sons of Horus Dreadnought. Yeah, no, this is perfectly fine. In my opinion, just don't put that crotch piece on and you'll dramatically transform the quality of the miniature. Whilst the knees and that don't look great, again remember this leg is poseable, they've just picked the worst possible pose to put it in. So ignore that and you're all set. So there you go, that's my overview of all the different Contemptor Dreadnoughts that have been released. There are some great ones in there, like the World Eaters one, the Death Guard one, the out of production Iron Hands one still would have made a great Contemptor Cordis. The thing that pissed me off about that one is there was no warning. That thing just disappeared, and overnight, no one knew why. No one to this day knows. It just vanished. Real shame. Oh, they lost the mold. They lost the mold. Fuck off, they lost the mold. They have one mold and no masters? Come on. That's not how it works. They make like 3 master molds. Well, they make a main master and then like 3 secondaries off that, and then the tertiaries off that are what they use to actually create the models with. The idea is that, you know, you make the occasional casting out of your main primary mold, and then that is used, or sorry, those secondary molds are used to make a casting, and they're used to make the occasional Dreadnought, for example, whenever one of your other tertiary dies wears out. this new mold. That way the Dreadnought that you bring in is like really crisp and detailed and close to the original, and then you make a new mold off that so it stays crisp and detailed, because you only get a few hundred casts at most out of a single mold. So yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's any real reason to complain about these Dreadnoughts. Do they have the love that the Dreadnoughts had back when Heresy was in its heyday? I'd say yes. I'd say yes, they do. These Dreadnoughts, I won't lie, computer sculpting has hurt in some ways, like just slapping that same shield on the belt and on the shoulder. It does reek of laziness, but it hasn't really hurt the models. I think these are still fine looking models. So, overall, Contemptors, not in a bad place. It'll be interesting to see with Leviathans. I'm shocked and appalled that the Iron Warriors and the Iron Hands of all legions haven't got their own Leviathans. Instead, they chose to give them to fucking White Scars. The legion that least likely to use Dreadnoughts, most likely to use jet bikes, most likely to rape and pillage China in the 13th century. That legion, for some reason, Dreadnought, Leviathan Dreadnought. Whereas the legions that are renowned for using Dreadnoughts, like Iron Hands and Iron Warriors, Iron Hands, in fact, have no Dreadnoughts right now, so you work that fucking one out. Anyway, I'm back with the Outer Circle. Hope you all enjoyed this episode. It was just something different, something fun. I wanted to respond to people. Again, yes, the best Dreadnought is still the World Eaters, Legion Contemptor, and the Death Guard Legion Contemptor is also right up there. Those two, by far and away, the best Dreadnoughts. But anyway, hope you enjoy it. Tell me what you like and dislike about the Dreadnoughts, your favourite one, all that sort of thing in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.